right, so hello and welcome back everyone to the Radiant Woman podcast. Today I'm super excited to be joined by Victoria Bardović, who is a somatic sexologist and the director of Yoni Elixir, which we've got in the studio today. So welcome, Vic. So great to have you here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
So I'd love to, just to start off with, do you want to just share a bit about yourself and what inspired you to get into this work?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a long journey. I was working out the other day, I think I've been a somatic sexologist for like 9 years now.
Wow.
Yeah, which surprised me when I looked at that. But I mean, it's been a big fascination of mine. And I guess I feel like my mastery path of my lifetime is Eros. Like I'm constantly in this question mark of like, what is this? You know, how does it work? You know, is there any patterns? Is it predictable in any way? And mostly I'm figuring out no. But I am just forever inspired by it and forever like drawn to just keep being with it and meeting people inside of what this language creates for people. And my own personal journey, I had a very abusive relationship many years ago now. It must be, I don't even know when that was, maybe 2013, I think. 2013. And it really shut everything off. And it was the first time in my life that I'd ever experienced this body without sexuality. You know, like even as a kid, I don't have any memories where I didn't have like this Eros, this aliveness, like pulsing through my system. And there's like the freedom of that and the aliveness of that. And then I just had this really big experience of like, wow, this is what it's like when it's not there. And at the time, like Instagram wasn't a thing. Social media wasn't really big at that time. And I was really like searching and I came across Tantra. But like in the back of the internet, you know, like, and like met with some of the sort of pioneers of that space that are still around and very old today. And they really like just took me on a very big journey of just understanding what it was I was dealing with, and not just the trauma, but also just like the bigger mastery path of what was actually calling me forth in my purpose and all those pieces. Because I remember being like 17 or something, or being in my mum's garden and being like, I want to, you know, be a sex teacher or something. And I was like, that's not a thing. That doesn't exist, you know? And then just like to be alive in the day that we are alive in right now, and be in a beautiful industry full of sex coaches and people that are educating on this topic that was not a thing when we grew up. We just worked out with the same age. So like that time, it wasn't a possibility. And I feel like that was almost Eros just informing me to follow that thread, because it was becoming something, and even the industry kind of feels like it was building itself around the time when I really opened into this, you know?
Yeah, I love that. And especially the pieces around, because just before we jumped on live, we were talking about, so we're both 6 lines in human design, and how very early on you just knew and you felt the sense of like purpose and what you're here to do. And that's something I definitely resonate with. Because I remember being like, maybe 18, 19, saying to my brother, like, I just want to be a businesswoman. And I had no idea what that business was going to be. But I'm like, I just know I'm here to like, anyway. So I'd love to also know what you shared around, so Eros. So for anyone listening who's like, what is that? How would you define that?
Yeah, I actually feel that Eros is almost like this other pulse inside of your body, very similar to your heartbeat. And the pulse is, I feel it's connected to the Earth's pulse. And what I have been tracking with people is like it's kind of like 2 places that our sexuality can come from. One is adrenaline, which I feel like a lot of people are only know their sexuality through adrenaline, actually. And it is that like, it's like the sparking of, you know, 2 sticks rubbing together. It's like, you know, it's this electricity that people
kind of
experience.
like a horny teenage boy type energy
inside of all of us. And for me, that is often what I see is like that is sparked through something that wants to be met inside of us. But it almost like what I've seen when sex moves from that place, or sexual energy moves through the body in that place, it's like, because I believe that sexual energy is what gives us our creativity and almost drives us towards our purposes and our projects and things like that.
Definitely.
When the sexuality comes through that adrenaline space, it's usually like a wound that is looking to be met. And so projects often don't last very long. Sometimes relationships are very like quick to start and to end. And same with sexuality. Right. It's like when the adrenaline is like driving that.
Like a clitoral orgasm.
Yeah. It's and like a bad clitoral orgasm. Sometimes I think the click, it's like a bit of a bad rap, you know? Like, so clitoral orgasms are great.
Sorry, clitoris. But just, like that quick, and then it's like,
and it's all over.
It's over.
It doesn't change your life, you know?
Yeah.
Versus...
Yes. Yeah. Versus an orgasm that changes. You're like, exactly. Oh my God, I see God.
Those orgasms, that's what I'm talking about. And for me, that's like the Kundalini energy. And when I talk about like, you know, it's coming, we're tracking the pulse of the earth, like that, there's a Kundalini energy that's available to all of us in the earth. And I believe that if we are able to like drop into our Eros, for me, it's like the difference between trusting that wave of pleasure when it comes on, and that you don't have to grasp for it or chase it. It's like it's kind of like you're coming into the pulse. In it. Yeah.
Just relax and surrender into it.
Exactly. And then, and like, and it feels like nature. It feels like the seasons, you know, it feels all of those pieces.
Yeah.
And when I've seen that energy come into people, it's like it burns them up, and it drives them, and it creates very sustainable businesses and projects. And usually what it's doing is like working with the force that is already there in the world, and things that come through that, they often don't need to be forced or like pushed with our willpower, which is actually where I really resonate with your message, because I feel like the Radiant Woman like movement that you're speaking to is that, you know, like without that drive to push things and override the body, something else can naturally come into the body and actually drive like your whole being to create.
Totally. Yeah. And thank you for just kind of defining what that is for you. And because I guess when you're sharing about that, for me, I just know it as like joy or life force energy or something like that. But yeah, I always love hearing all the different interpretations and ways that people, just interpret it or experiencing it. So yeah, I love that. Thank you. I'm learning things here today. So, okay, next. What inspired you to create this amazing Yoni Elixir, which is, you know, a beautiful extension of and build on everything we've just been talking about?
Yes, I mean, I'm pretty sure you know my story. I had created a school called the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy. Yeah. And inside of that, I had a modality that I got globally accredited through a few different bodies, through different governing bodies. And the journey of that was really from this desire, this like yearning to assist women in this like awakening, you know, like I had a very big sexual awakening that really like rocked my life and showed me so much. I just felt like magic was just happening everywhere. And all I had to do was just like rest into that and just be in the pleasure of it. And then I had this calling to basically find the others and help the others if that was so desired, you know. And it wasn't when the school came out, it wasn't like this mental, I want to educate people on how to be a sex coach. It wasn't that. It was women are having an awakening to the priestess, to the goddess, to the deep feminine energy that was happening. And I had some things I wanted to share with that. And the school was a really epic way of really just like, you know, like sort of waving that flag, you know, and just calling women to that. And then I just started to see that there was, as I kind of deepened into the teachings and into the sharings, it was like the branches of the tree just got bigger of like how this can actually be transmitted, because it became really obvious to me that it wasn't like, if I tell you this story, then you're going to have your sexual awakening. It was like, oh, there's a transmission here that's available, and women that have experienced it, that have felt this magic, can actually activate that in other women just by being around them or just by journeying with them. And so then
embodiment speaks louder than words is something I like to say.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
And then I started to see how that was actually reflected even in the plants, you know. So there's certain plants that I before I even got into sexuality, I was always working with herbs, always, you know, kind of like known I was a witch since I was like, you know, this high. And I just started to see how these vibrations actually were in particular herbs as well. And so it was like the vibrations were in people, the vibrations were in plants, and what could happen if those things came together. So for me, Yoni Elixir is like, it's an answer to wanting to see this mass awakening of the feminine waking up inside of women in a bigger way, you know, in a way that can actually, that women can do in a real private, potent way, you know. And that's what I was realizing. I was like, it takes a certain kind of woman to come and study at the Institute of New Paradigm Intimacy and recognize herself in the priestess in that way. And
definitely.
There was like that next stage of the movement that was coming through, you know, where it was like, okay, now more women are wanting to do this in the privacy of their own bedroom in a very like sacred way. And this for me was like the key that was going out to unlock that for women. And it's like, it's really down to like every single thing that I do with when I'm making it. Like I have a huge cauldron like this big. I sing to it. I play the harp to it. You know, there's prayers that go into this. That's all about awakening your sexuality around, that vibration. And all of the herbs in there are like ones to lower cortisol in the body, to awaken the libido, to create relaxation. There's so many different things in there.
Which is so important for women, and especially entrepreneurial women.
Exactly.
Like,
there's some like womb herbs in there as well that really just like massage the uterus as well. So there's like all these things that just start to change and shift how we're even relating to our body. And that was so exciting to me when I was like, oh, this can actually go out and do the bidding. Yeah,
I love that. And what I'm hearing in that is it's just like this became, it's like, just an extension of that purpose that you have of just like, okay, what's the evolution? And I love that, right? Because it's like constantly, as we're constantly evolving, especially sex lines, like very rapidly all the time. Then our purpose is also evolving with us, and how we are, what it looks like. And like I know I've been doing this work for 8 years now, so similar to you, and that's changed that's evolved so many times over the last 8 years. So I love that. And I also love, just because I'm all about embodiment. I'm like, there's no point in, kind of like what you're saying, like it's like, we can learn all this cool shit and understand it and all the things mentally, but if we're not getting into our bodies and we're not embodying the thing, that's like, that's what makes us human. Otherwise we may as well just be a spirit floating around in space, you know. And this the elixir, just from, I've had it for a month or two now. Time's so weird for me. A couple months, let's say. But just, I must say, I'm pretty sure. I mean, I can't say that it's that for sure, but I've definitely been feeling. Okay, TMI, but I'm just going to share. Sorry, not sorry to we have a guy recording this podcast. On the weekend, I was like, do you know what I was actually feeling? And I literally felt like this part of my body was humming. It was like almost like my vagina is humming. I'm like, what the hell? This has never happened before. It was and I was like, I was just feeling so incredibly horny. I was like, what's going on here? and then like we were lying in bed one night, and Steve, my husband, he'd already gone to sleep. And sometimes I like to roll over and just like cuddle him because it's, you know, soothing for my nervous system. And then I rolled back over, and then next minute he woke up, and then he's like, you know, starting to get all up on my grill, and he's like, what did you do? I was fast asleep. Nice. I'm like, I didn't do anything, but there's a lot of humming and vibrating happening down here. So that's been my experience with it so far.
I love that. Kind of makes sense, you know, because it is the herbs, but it's also just like when the blood flow is being encouraged to go into that area. It does have more of a hum because there's naturally more blood there. And that's why I encourage women, like, it's not just like, okay, do your self-pleasure practice. It's like, it's like a daily tonic. Just like place it on your yoni and move on with your day, you know? Like, it's such a notice a difference.
Put your face cream on, then put your Yoni
Elixir on.
Okay, all right, I'm going to do that. Yeah. It was really great. Okay. Without going into too much detail. So I would love to know, because how long have you been an entrepreneur?
Maybe 11 years. I had a small business before this one, which was in yoga and Ayurveda.
Yoga, yeah, awesome.
Different timeline.
So I'd love to know, what have been your top 3 lessons that you've learned from being an entrepreneur over these last 11 years?
Top lessons. I think it is that piece that I was speaking to around like willpower versus like divine will. Like I personally feel that business really needs to align to our unique imprint. Yeah. And not just be pushing every single strategy because it works. Because every strategy works for the person who's aligned to that genius.
Exactly.
You know? And like being more of a projector, there is been that lesson of just like, I can do all the hustle things, and especially when I hang out with generators and and that energetic, but that's not necessarily like fulfillment, you know? And that was also a big piece for me around business and entrepreneurship. There's been times throughout my entrepreneur journey where I've been like, I'm kind of still acting like an employee, you know? Like anytime 100%. I've just been following all of these strategies and doing all the things, and I'm not following what's in my deepest desire, I'm really just acting like an employee, you know, just doing the job that needs to be done versus finding the fulfillment and the freedom that I actually really want. So I'd say that's the second thing. Yeah.
And that's, I feel like, yes, what you just shared there, I think that is something that so many people can resonate with, because it's something that I see like in all the women that I support. And even for me, sometimes it's like the sneaky conditioning that comes back in of like, it's like we become entrepreneurs to get out of that, like the rat race and the matrix and all of that. But then we can have such deep conditioning around like, okay, like Monday to Friday, I'm going to work on my business. And, you know, and absolutely what you shared around finding the strategy that works for us versus, because that's one of the biggest things I see is like when people, they're disconnected from self, from their heart, you would say from their womb, but they're disconnected from self, from the body, from their own wisdom. And then they're just looking out there at this person's doing that person's doing that. Even like business coaches telling me to do that. And then so they're doing all the things and maybe getting the results, maybe not. But even if they are getting the results, it doesn't feel good. And it's because, it's got to come from, you're only going to be truly successful when it's coming from the heart and from inspiration. Yeah. And that's why... Yeah, I mean, like, it's similar message. It's the whole message of Radiant Woman is like, do what works for you, and connection to self is everything. It's fucking everything. It's the foundation. Without that, like, what are we even doing with our lives, let alone our businesses? So thank you for sharing that. It's very... Lots of people need to hear it.
Yeah, I agree.
But anyway, sorry, what was your third?
My third one, I think it's around, it's actually something about like trusting in the current of life and the evolution of entrepreneurship. Yes. I feel like there's been
all of these. I'm like, preach. Yes, 1000%.
Yeah. There's like I've had these experiences of like chapters where I'm like, oh no, if I let go of this way of doing business, or if I don't get leads in this way, or if I don't, whatever story, then I'm not going to be able to make the money that I've been making, or I'm not going to be able to be successful in the ways I've been successful. And every time it's been bullshit. Every time I've been like, oh, how interesting. Money has come from over here now. You know, and it feels like, and I know that you're a big stand for this, is like, it's like the work that we've done to develop the, I don't know, wealth resonance or, capability to hold a certain amount of energy, money, resources doesn't really go backwards in my experience. It just finds a different way to find its way to you. And the more I've let go, it's been terrifying at times. Like the more I've let go of any kind of logic that this is how money comes to me, this is how I build the funnels that brings the money towards me, or all of those stories, it's like none of that's real. And the magic that I've witnessed of how things come into my life is, I can't even explain it. I couldn't even teach it to you if I wanted to, like,
I totally get it.
Yeah, it's actually like something really on my heart around that. Even like self-development, like people come to me for a certain embodiment of what I'm holding, and all I ever do is take them into the embodiment of what they're holding, because what comes for us is meant for us if we come into being really honest with the truth of who we are. But most people I see that are struggling in entrepreneurship and that come to me as mentor as well, feels like they're not able to be with who their genius,
who they truly
really
are.
Yeah.
And that really is the biggest block. It's like,
absolutely.
It's not that you got the wrong strategy or this or that. It's just like, if I always like to say, it's like the best business strategy is just being who we truly are. And yes, I absolutely resonate with that, because even like right now I'm going through that where I'm stepping into a whole new, like a completely whole new business structure. And it's like, it's exciting. And every time there's like, it's like, oh my God, it's such a big letting go. But it's almost like that trust of, and that reclamation of, my abundance doesn't come from out there. Like I am the abundance. And then when we remember that, like exactly what you're sharing, I experience the same thing, to the point where sometimes I'm scared to even talk about it on social media, because I'm like, are people just going to think I'm full of shit? But literally when I just let go, like it's almost weird. I can be working really hard and that starts to block the flow of abundance coming. And then the second, like this literally happened the other week, right? Like we went away to the sunny coast. I had lots of things to do, but here's the thing, there's always fucking things to do, right? And I had this moment where my friend and I we're lying on the beach and it's a beautiful day, and I had this guilt come up because I was like, there's stuff I need to do. I should be working right now. I was like, no, I'm just going to trust that me just chilling out on the beach with my best friend, receiving the sun, is actually going to be more supportive for my business than me going and doing all these things. And I just let go. And then literally the day after we got back, I like had a call, and then later that day I had $16,000 come into my bank account, and I was just like, oh, of course. Like, why do I keep going back into those patterns of like, But it's
Keeps you relatable.
Keeps me because I'm a bloody human. And the big thing for me is, do you know the Enneagram?
No.
So it's just yet another, but it's a really great one, like personality type test. And I'm a 3, which is the achiever. So it's like the big journey of my life has been to detangle my worthiness from like achieving and working and doing. So anyway, that's a whole other thing. So, okay, loving this. So what are your radiance rituals? What are the things that you do that have you feel radiant?
A lot of mine is to do with oil actually, and herbs. So some of mine are, when I take a bath, I do like a combination of things. One is like, so magnesium always, because that is just like so good for the body, especially for women, for hormones. So I guess taking care of my hormonal health is like a really big one for me. And then I usually have some form of herbs in the bath, and then I will put have like a bowl of oil as well, and I will massage the oil all over my body whilst I'm in the bath. And sometimes I use oil, sometimes I use tallow. You heard of tallow?
Yeah.
Like animal fat.
Yeah.
Yeah, not like a little greased up vegetable, but like
It's meant to be amazing for your skin.
It's so amazing for your skin. So you just like
Interesting. I've never tried that.
Yeah. It's not the one that you put in the lab thing. There is actually a bodily one that you can put on your body.
So like next time I do a slow cook lamb,
that's it. You're gonna be like yeah. So
Okay.
really into I'm really into those things, really into like basically like all things that support my skin, because this is also like how we bring vibrancy and radiance into the skin is like a really it's like the easiest way to get into radiance rituals. Usually after I have a bath, and I'm usually doing my self-pleasure practice, which I think I shared a little bit with you, but I'll share a little bit more now.
Yeah.
The self-pleasure practice for me is very different to masturbation. Like masturbation, we're going to have orgasm, arousal, pleasure. Once it's done, you know? And it usually involves being naked, take your clothes off, you know, like, and touch your genitals. And with self-pleasure, like it opens up a little wider than that for me. So when I'm looking for self-pleasure, I'm just going, all right, I'm going to have like a time window. I'm going to put on a playlist, and then I'm just going to drop into my body, notice what thoughts are there, emotions, where the feelings are in my body, and then track the sensations. And then I'm utilizing the tantric tools, sound, breath, movement, and touch to communicate with my body. So, and this is kind of my version of shadow work as well, you know, like anything that's moving, that wants to excavate, that wants to move through, that wants to be digested. It's like I'm working through the sensations to just allow. I'm not really into meaning making. I actually can't stand meaning making a lot of the time. Like, I don't like to put a lot, oh, this happened because this happened. I don't really live like that. I live more like, okay, my body is.
And even that can be like become a block for people to actually drop in. It's like a protection mechanism of actually being able to drop into the body and the emotions and what's actually there. So, great.
That's pretty much, that's exactly what I believe. This is not really a podcast, it's you and I disagreeing on everything. My head is just reading your head, vice versa.
Both 6 lines.
That's what it is. Yeah, and then that's some somatic practices. What else do I do for radiance rituals? I don't know. I think that my self-pleasure and like skin rituals are my top sort of 2 main ones that I would do. Yeah.
What are the things, because there's obviously something I've noticed in my life, and being a classic overachiever personality type is like, it's like, I have my list of like daily non-negotiables, and I'm very disciplined with all that. But then I also notice like just simple things, like for me, I love just walking down to the beach and just jumping in the ocean and like feeling the sun on my skin, or maybe it will be, you know, time with my husband, or just being in nature. There's like, or even just having a morning where there's nothing in my calendar. I don't need to be anywhere, and I just get to like see what wants to unfold. Like those things also really support my radiance and my joy. Yeah. So what are you know, those are the rituals. What are the other things that bring you joy, bring you radiance?
Pretty protective over my calendar. Not much gets to be booked in, really. Yeah. And you know,
so spaciousness.
Yeah. Like, and when I was in like the height of like, you know, and I was working like 14-hour days in the beginning of my business. I know, like those learning days. Yeah. It was like I was just like, this can't be right. You know, there's just no spaciousness. You know, and I just like, that was like the word. That is wealth to me. Like, having spaciousness. Yeah, spaciousness. Not having lots of stuff in my calendar.
Literally, my body responds to hearing 14 days. I'm like,
I know. I can't even imagine that person. Like, it's so wild. Yeah. But I'm so glad I did it. You know, like I feel really grateful.
Totally.
I think what
learning through contrast.
Yeah, that piece is really big for me, and also just like initiating. Like I think I've realized that everything I do is never for the outcome anymore. It's for the initiation, you know, even for like, you know, like even like I just got married this year. I'm like thinking, yes, I do want to have a happy marriage, but it's like, that's not the goal. You know, for me, the goal of us getting married is like, oh, there's an initiatory path that this union wants to take, and part of that is marriage, you know.
Oh yes.
Yeah, and I feel that so strongly. And there's like all the things like projects and marriage and all these things are really just calling for different parts of us to come alive. So when I think about back to 14-hour days, I'm like, I needed to know what that felt like. I needed to really see that, to know it. And I almost feel like, I mean, maybe I will work 14-hour days again. Who knows? I don't want to say never, but like I will be surprised, because I feel like something happened inside of that. It's like I drank all the juice of what I could learn from working in that way. And and now I feel like there's something else can emerge because I've really done that and I've really known that path.
Drank all the juice. I like that saying. I'm like, oh, that's a good saying. I'm going to use that. I love that. Well, those are all the questions that I have for you.
Nice.
Do you have any questions for me?
Yeah, I mean, from this, I'm kind of interested to hear about your sexual awakening. You know, like I kind of know about your business awakening, but I'd love to hear about your sexual awakening.
I don't know if I've even had a sexual awakening.
Oh, it sounds like you have.
Well, how would you? Okay, well, before we go into that, how would you define a sexual awakening?
I mean, for me, there's a moment where you wake up to the understanding that sex is not put penis in vagina, and you realize that sex is more like art and how expansive that is.
Right.
And then there's also like that, I think inside of a female body, there's often this moment where you kind of recognize that you're kind of like Shakti, or you're every face of the goddess, and you're every, like, you know, you're not just the woman that you thought you were, like a kid that grew into a woman. It's like, you're like, whoa, I am woman as a collective, you know, like I am
power.
I am power. I'm all of it, you know, and I can feel goosebumps when I say it, you know, like that moment for me is where I usually define a woman's sexual awakening, when she recognizes that.
Right. Yeah. So, well, it's interesting because, like, with what you were sharing around how there was never a time where you didn't remember feeling that, what you call Eros, like that aliveness and everything. I've had quite the journey with it, because, all right, let's just get vulnerable here. I remember that very early on as well, like, you know, in some of my earliest memories, but just feeling just very expressed and feeling like a sexual being. But then obviously what happened was, when I was 5 years old, my father started taking advantage of that, and he, you know, sexually abused me from the ages of 5 to about 7. And so my journey was, fuck, shut that down, not safe.
Yeah.
And and so aside from all of that and the complexities of that level of trauma, I think the biggest thing was like the disconnection from myself, like of all the healing work I've done over the last many, many, many years. The thing that actually hurt the most was, it's like I lost myself. I felt like I abandoned myself and who I truly was, and particularly that part, because that's like like you say, it's life, it's aliveness, it's bliss, it's pleasure, it's ecstasy. And so, I disassociated from a very young age just to survive, I guess. And then it was only about 6 years ago, so after I had my son River, when I realized, you know, I'd been doing a lot of personal development and healing, but it hadn't been somatic, it hadn't been in the body. It hadn't been addressing any of the deeper stuff. And I hit a point of extreme burnout, felt like I wanted to die. And that's when I found the embodiment work, which the first piece of that was Koya. And then not long after that, I found Tigress Yoga. Have you heard of Tigress Devashi? Yeah. So, and literally I remember finding those things, and I remember saying to my mentor at the time, I was like, all I really care about right now is connecting to myself, because I felt like I'd just gone a whole lifetime of being so disconnected from myself and my body. And I literally just spent like a year. I was so burnt out. I even stopped working. I just spent a year of like just doing embodiment practices every single day. And yeah. And I remember, well, it was interesting, right? And I guess this is like the polarity of life, because on the one hand, what started coming up was grief, rage, like basically all of the shit that I'd been running away from my whole life. So that was coming up, and that was intense. Like, it was full on. But then on the other hand, I was starting to feel again. And so what that meant was, when it came to intimacy, because I was resensitized, I was feeling my pain. I was also feeling my pleasure more because I was feeling it again. And and I remember that, I guess that's probably when that part of me really started waking up again and coming more online. And that's when I really realized, like, oh, there's no such thing as selective feeling. Because, like, if you want to feel pleasure, joy, ecstasy, you've also got to feel all of the grief and the sadness and the anger. And that's why I've pretty much been obsessed with embodiment ever since. But yeah, I think maybe a little bit different, where you had like an awakening. It sounds like kind of all in one time. I feel like for me, it's been a gradual thing that continues to deepen for me, and has like since I started doing the embodiment work 6 years ago.
Powerful. Love that.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I have a curiosity, I guess, then, like, what's your sort of number one advice piece that you give to women that are actually still unable to come into the body, you know? And there is that stuckness in the mind where it's safer.
Well, what do you mean by unable to come into the body?
Yeah, like challenged. Yeah, what's happening in the body.
I mean, I feel like everyone is able to come into the body, but I guess your desire to experience all that you came here to be, like your desire to experience true joy and pleasure and bliss, which is what I believe we're here for, especially as women, right? Your desire for that needs to be stronger than your fear of feeling the uncomfortable emotions.
Absolutely.
Because if someone's getting more out of being disassociated, because, like, here's the thing, right? It's like disassociation isn't bad. And for a long time, I judged it, and I was like, oh my God, I was so disconnected from myself. But then when I actually looked back, I'm like, wow, thank you, disassociation, because you allowed me to go through such severe trauma, but then still live a kind of normal life. And, you know, like, I remember the year my dad went to prison, I had then this epic birthday party with like all my friends, and it was like, wow. And that's thanks to just being able to just numb out from the pain. So, but then we get to a point where I guess every woman's got to get to a point where we go, okay, I want more. I want to experience more. And just that desire. And I think just also coming back to a couple of the pieces we've touched on around like trust and courage, and knowing that anything that's there, like you've already experienced it before. So it's not going to kill you, because I remember for me, there's been times in my journey where I felt like if I open the floodgates, I'll drown. But then I realized, we don't have to open the floodgates all at once. And in fact, we don't do that anyway in healing, in any kind of like somatic healing. It's actually, we're just opening them a bit at a time, and that we're actually in control of that. And especially if we're working with a really, a skilled facilitator and someone that can guide us to just start to gently open up the door. Okay, feel it a bit as much as I can in that moment. Have a break, and then maybe, further down the line. And it's just, for me, it's just been layer by layer, and realizing that like building the relationship of trust with my body, trusting that my body is the container for alchemy. And I think it really comes back to as well just finding a really great facilitator or coach you can work with who's trauma informed and who can guide you, and hold you in a really safe and loving space, because especially for the deeper stuff, like we can't do that alone.
Agreed.
I tried to, and then I went to, when I sat in a ayahuasca ceremony a few years ago, it was like, the grandmother, sometimes she's loving, sometimes she just gives you a big fucking slap across the face. She was like, stop trying to fucking do this on your own. And I remember like laying there with Jen on one side and Pearl on the other side. And I was like, I've been so stupid. I've been trying to do this on my own and I just can't. And
full goosebumps.
Yeah. It's like letting go of the ego, letting go of that, all that protective layer, and just go, no, what I'm wanting is more important than any of that. And I get to just let go and receive support and come back to who I truly am.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
I do have one more question.
Yeah.
Let's just come to it. It's a bit of a 6-line question.
Okay. Love it.
Okay. Yeah, what was just coming to me was like ayahuasca was a big part of most people's journey. Embodiment has been such a big part of people's journey. There's like so many women that I know that really agree with what we're saying, like that there's maybe a feminine way of doing business. There's like there's a lot of sort of similarities. You and I have barely spoken. We don't know each other that well. And yet we have such a knowing of the same things, which is very exciting for me when I feel that like, oh, hang on, we've lived completely different lives and yet somehow we've got to a similar kind of place. And I have this like obsession with like the evolutionary edge of the industry, the world that we're living in. Yeah. And I'm curious what you think. Where is this going? Like we're all being woken up to a particular frequency. Why do you think that is? And what do you see is going to happen in the sort of next 10 years of this work?
Ooh, yeah, that's a good question. And I want to hear your answer to this as well, because also you're a 6 and a projector, so that's very yeah, great question. So I remember last year I did a really incredible 240-hour coaching mastery training with a woman in the States, and something she said is that, in the coaching industry, basically she said what she was sharing with us in there is about 5 years ahead of the coaching industry, because what I see, starting with the industry, is in all of this work, I think the big shift that's happening is it's been very, and this is my experience of just like 14 years of doing this and having, doing every modality under the sun. It's felt very like separated and segregated, a lot of the things. So I don't know about you, but I felt like, it's like over here I'm doing some mindset work, and then over here I'm doing some healing work, and then over here I'm doing like some spiritual work. And it's all been very, very separated. Whereas to me, I see, and I even said this to my coach, was like, I feel like I call myself a coach because people know what a coach is.
It's accessible, yeah.
But it's like, this is actually a whole new thing, because the way I see it, coaching, like creating what you want, and then the healing work, those two things should not be separate. So I just feel like what's happening is we're just coming back into we're coming back into wholeness. There's just been so much, like disconnection and disassociation, and so much of like, just living so much from the mind. And I feel like, I mean, collectively, we're just coming back into our hearts and back into our bodies, and being able to trust the wisdom, like our internal wisdom, versus like outsourcing it to the mind and like learning information from external places. I mean, I dream of a world where we don't even need to do this profession, because it's just normal to live with an open heart and lead from your heart, and and be able to trust that, and everyone's living in harmony together. And I mean, I hope that's where it's going, because I've had many moments where I've found it challenging to be here on planet Earth, where I feel like I'm such a sensitive soul, and it's like I don't want to be here. Like, there's so much darkness, there's so much pain, and like I can't. And sometimes when I'm hearing things that are happening in the world, I'm like, it breaks my heart, and that's why I don't even really follow much apart from what I'm doing in my own life. But that's everything that I do in my work. I mean, that's the intention of that. It helps contribute to that direction. I don't know where it's going, but I hope that's where it's going.
It's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. It's cool. How about you? Where do you see it's going?
This is something that I've been really like journeying with, because like I had the 7-figure coaching business. I really feel like there was a point of like, oh, this is all the things that I said and thought I wanted, and then went into this experience of like, this way isn't actually accurate for me, whatever's happening. And there was a loss, I feel, of like my true artist that really happened in that, like in the producing of so much content, in the producing of all the different things, like a lot, like another part of me wasn't really, and it didn't matter how I created it and set it up and changed the places, it just didn't really emerge in the same way. And I think that that was one part of the sort of unfulfillment. The other second part was around like the yearning to be with the others for me is a big part of I guess why I was even called to do the work. And when I speak to the others, it is the ones that are really, what I love is emergent spaces, like not, I don't want to learn something like, I don't know, like NLP, for example, has been around so long, it's epic, great tech, but I don't have a desire to learn it because it's been around for so long. It's not really where the cutting edge is anymore for me personally. And
my whole coaching career, multiple times early on, I looked at studying NLP, and every single time my intuition, my body's knowing, was like, nope.
It's not that.
Nope.
That's so funny. And like some of my like feeling is like I want to be with the others that are ready to live in that emergent way. And I have found myself most excited by people that are really willing to be so self-responsible. So one of my second pain point, I think of my...
Me too.
I
can't be around people who aren't.
It's really hard. And it's really rife in the self-development space. And I think that's like, if I look at what we've been doing, it feels like we've been clearing for a bunch of taboos, right? Drugs is a taboo. Ayahuasca's kind of cleared for a lot of that. Sex is a huge taboo, like Eros, and this kind of sexual awakening of the feminine side of collective seems to have broken through a lot of that. I think the one we're on right now is power. And something that I track is like, there's a really weird thing that happens in coaching and mentoring. And I always do my best to try to like clear that.
Like the power dynamics?
It's kind of like, I'm going to give you my power as my mentor. And at some point I'm going to maybe reclaim it. Or, there's like the way it seems to, people seem to be to take their power and the giving away of power is like a very, and I feel the coaching industry in its shadows really plays into it. You know, it plays into
100%.
status like in a big way.
Yes.
And it plays into a lot of those dynamics. So I'm really interested in when I stand and I be the facilitator, especially because I work in sexuality. Good sex only happens when we're not in status and power dynamics and bullshit like that, you know, like, unless we're choosing the power dynamics, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If we're playing any kind of game of I'm better than you, or I've got something that you don't, or the sex is going to be terrible, because the ego and the identity is still there, and good sex can't happen until the identity leaves and the Eros can come through.
Yeah.
So the way that I have been working on facilitating is really just like seeing if it's possible to not hold the position of I know something that you don't know, and not hold the position of, really just inviting everybody into the mystery. I created this thing called Sex Lab that I've been running for the last year.
Yeah.
And it has been that, because I've been sitting with like, does the world need more sexuality practitioners? Like, there's a lot now, you know, and every week there's a new training for a school for this, that, or the other in coaching and sexuality and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. And I've been sitting with like, what does the world actually need then inside of the way of sexuality? And I believe that it's people that are really okay with relating to the unknown, and to hold their power. And so every time I, facilitate, I'm always just in this position of like, how can I invite people into recognition of their holding the power? I'm inviting them into my expertise, or my leadership inside of this is that I'm okay with the unknown. And I basically delete rules. I'm like, there's no rules here. There's no boundaries here. There's no consent here. You know, like, we are going to practice human decency, and we are going to do that as a collective. And I invite people into like holding that together. And when there's ruptures or when there's conflict, it's not like everybody looks at the leader, me, to find the answer to that. It's like I invite the collective to come into okay, cool. So some of us are feeling that this is off. What's possible now? Like, how do we want to resolve that? And that is really where like leadership and group facilitation and transformation is like very exciting for me. And where I think it's going to go in the next 10 years is like, we're not going to be handing our power over to gurus or coaches or big celebrity name coaches. We're going to be really, building communities actually, and building group experiences where people are able to hold power together. And that is very alive for me right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that, because it's I've definitely witnessed that as well. And it's like you can kind of see it where you can almost see it where people like they start working with a coach and then they become like a mini version of that coach.
The dogma finds its way in.
And they just start regurgitating everything that coach is saying, and it's like, and I feel that just comes back into the embodiment, and it's like, well, if that's happening, I don't think there's any embodiment work happening in that dynamic.
Absolutely.
Because you can't come into your body and not know your own power and like your own wisdom and like who are you versus outsourcing your power and pedestaling. And I've definitely had big lessons around that myself, where I did that a few years back. So thanks for naming that. It's I fully agree with another thing.
It is really sad that something just came into my mind just around that, like recently a really popular coach actually committed suicide actually in our community, and I won't mention any names, but I just feel that there's some, like I know people.
He did commit suicide.
I don't want to speak to all the pieces, but that is what I have heard. And for me, what I'm tracking is the pain of that for me is that I know that coaches that have abused their power, that were really moving through the circles that they were moving through, and I know they were working with them for a period of time, and they was, posing as a healer, posing as a coach, and actually really just abusing their power. And now I'm just sitting with like, that is like blood on this coach's hands, For me, it's like there's just like a really painful experience of like, that man probably stopped, trusting this industry, trusting this community of people that can support him. And I feel like that was a major breakage and fracture in his capacity to trust that he can rebuild and come back to, to center in that. So that feels very sad.
Yeah, it is really sad. And it's, and it also links back into what you're sharing around, like, you know, having the 7-figure business, but then not feeling fulfilled.
Yeah.
And like with what you asked before around where are we going, I think where we're going is just coming back to what actually matters, you know, for everyone, and that it's not status and money and achievement. It's just like, are you fucking happy? It's like, that's basically it. Yeah. If we're not happy, we're not successful. Doesn't matter if we got how much money we got in the bank. Yeah. And also ironically, like in what I've found, I'm sure you found the same, is the happier I am, the more money I make anyway. So
that's true.
In a much easier way without even trying.
Yeah.
So yeah. I think that's a big thing, redefining what success actually is. I feel like that's a big shift that's happening because this isn't, and I even feel, because I so believe in like the divine orchestration of everything, and people are always just teaching us and life's always teaching us. I mean, there's been multiple high profile people that have passed young in the last few years. And I think, I mean, others have like health issues and whatnot, but I think that's what it really touches on people of like, fuck, they had all this money and all this success, but in the end, were they really happy? And so it's exciting. It's exciting times that we live in.
It is and
exciting. Sometimes it's challenging being a 6 line, because I feel like, it's like, did you watch Zoolander growing up?
Of course.
You know, the guy with the white hair, and he's like, can nobody see this? I feel like I'm on crazy pills right now.
It's true. That is a lot of my experience.
That's what it's like being a 6 line.
Yep.
It's like, Anyway, thank you so much was there anything else you want to share?
No, that feels really good. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it's been great to have you on, and thank you. And well, I'm sure I'll have you back on again at some point.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you.
Hey, beautiful soul. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you about an upcoming life-changing 2-day event that my husband and I are running at the end of November. So it's on the 23rd and 24th of November, and this event, we've named it Transcendence, Unlock Your Full Potential. And this is really an event for those of you who know you're here for a reason. It's like you feel like you've been put on this earth with things to do, and you know you have so much potential, but you just can't quite seem to unlock it. Or maybe it's that you already are, doing amazing things, but you really want to deepen more and take everything to the next level. So in this 2-day event, you are going to break through limitations, fears, doubts, all those things that are holding you back, and really come more deeply into yourself, into your heart, into your body, learn about the mind-body connection, how to be really masterful with your emotions. I mean, there is so much that we are jam-packing into these 2 days. So tickets are limited. They're going to sell out. We will drop the link to purchase your tickets with all the event details in the show notes. And can't wait to see you there.